I'm Ehsan Ghavimi, and I'm here to talk to you about improvisation. And just to give you a little bit of background on me, so I'm a personal and executive coach, and improvisation is something that I use with my clients. It's something that has really had a profound impact on my life. And it's hard to believe, but I had zero theater experience. I had no performance experience. I just stumbled across this thing called improvisation when I was a student. So I went to this workshop, and I had no theater experience. I didn't really know what it was, but the word improvised really grabbed me. And I thought, wow, this sounds really interesting. So I went to this workshop, and it was just a group of people. I mean, these weren't professional actors. They weren't, theater types. They were just normal people. And they would just come together, and we would play these improv or improvisation games where we would just think on our feet. We would just make up stories and come up with storylines and just have fun. That was the thing with improv. It was just fun. And so I kept going back to this workshop every week. I just became addicted. It was so much fun. And without me realizing it, I was actually improving my communication skills and my ability to connect with people. I was very, very reserved. I found it very difficult to just do something like this, just talk to camera or just having a conversation. It was difficult for me, and I found it difficult to connect with people. So improvisation is something that has really changed my life, and this is why I love talking about it. I love helping people with it. I love coaching people on it, and I use it in my coaching work to this day. So today I really want to focus on how to use improvisation to create and to practice your presentation. Now this is for people who are maybe working in a corporate environment, executives, people who have to give business presentations. It's tailored for you, and I want to make this 100% practical. So I'm going to tell you some stories. I'm going to give some examples from my life, from my clients, and I just really want you to really listen. And the most important thing is that you apply this to your own life. So I'm going to talk about 5 steps. So 5 steps. Number 1, when I was creating my TEDx talk, I found it quite tricky in the beginning to be clear about what I want to talk about. And this is something that happens so much with people that I work with clients, with speakers that I know. It can be very tempting to just go out and speak, to stand up and just give a presentation without knowing specifically what you're talking about. I've done it in the past, and since I started doing this thing which I'm about to tell you about, which is just in one sentence to write down what your talk is about, since I started doing this, I have so much more clarity about what I'm talking about. The people who I'm talking to have so much clarity about what I'm talking about, and people are so much more engaged. So this is what I did for my TEDx talk. I just sat down and I thought, I have 15 minutes. What am I going to talk about? I had a flood of ideas, like so many different things. And I was tempted to just try and talk about everything. But from my experience, I knew, okay, I need to just pick one thing. So I spent a lot of time refining this one sentence. And that sentence was the story of the key moments in my life where I've improvised and what I've learned along the way. That's it. That's all I talked about for 15 minutes. And this is a big mistake that I see a lot of business people make, a lot of people who are giving presentations. They go up and they just talk about everything. They try and be all things to all people, and it's so much better just to pick one sentence and be super clear and explain it in a way that a child can understand. Super simple. So the story of the key moments in my life where I've improvised and what I've learned along the way. That's it. Everything else is irrelevant. I don't talk about it. So the next thing I did, once I had this sentence, it gave me a great starting point to then start to list what are the key points that I want to talk about. So what are the absolute essential things that I want to talk about? Now, initially, I had a massive list of all the different things I wanted to cover, and I only had 15 minutes. So I had to really condense it down. So once I had this huge list, I started to really ask myself, which one of these things relates back to my sentence, which was the story of the key moments in my life. So I got rid of all the irrelevant moments. I boiled it down to the key moments, and I made a list of those moments. The next step, number 3, was I picked an image. So a very powerful and specific image. So I didn't pick any generic stock images. This is another mistake I see a lot of people making, choosing very vague. You just Google a certain word and then you just pop that into your presentation. That doesn't connect with people. It's much better if you really think about what kind of an image is really going to connect with your audience, and which of these images really connect back to the list of key points that you had. So for example, if you have 5 key points, you want to pick an image for every single one of those key points which directly corresponds to it and is very clear and is very powerful, and ideally is an interesting image that when you see it you think, wow, what's this about? That's the whole point. You want to really connect with people beyond just putting text on a slide. I see this so much. It's like the cardinal sin. Maybe this has happened to you before. Maybe you've been sitting in a presentation and the person is speaking and a slide comes up which has it's got like an essay written on it. And so you're trying to read the essay, you're trying to listen to the speaker, you're trying to take notes. It's too much. So I personally don't like to have much text. Ideally 0 text on my slides. I understand that for some business presentations you need to have some data, you need to have some information. I completely understand that. Again, try your very best to limit the amount of text and really boil it down. If you have to, you can convey text through images. So something like a graphic, a pie chart, a 3D diagram, something that isn't just 36%, 4.5, facts and figures do not connect with people. Images are so much more powerful. So that was number 3, an image for each point. Now the next step is to improvise. Now this is where we really get into the improvisation side of things. So once you have your one sentence and you've written out your list of key points, and then you also have an image for each of your points, what I did for my TEDx talk was I just arranged those images into a PowerPoint, and I would just put my laptop beside me when I was practicing, and I would just look at these images and I would start to just talk about what the image represented. So if an image came up of, for example, me performing at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, I would just start to talk about what that image was about. And that connected back to the key points and the one sentence that I mentioned earlier. Now, the whole point of this process of improvising and talking is that a huge mistake that a lot of people make is that they spend most of their time when they're preparing for a speech just writing. It's incredible. I've seen this with executives I've worked with. I've seen this with business people, with people who are managers, with people who are working in a corporate team. Just it's public speaking. It's not public writing. So you want to prepare for your speech by speaking. You don't want to prepare for your speech by writing over and over and over again. If you're writing a report, fantastic. You want to write draft after draft after draft. If you are giving a speech, you really want to practice by speaking, because the people that you're speaking to, no one cares about your draft that you've written. You could have a beautiful essay that you've written, word for word perfect, but people don't see that. The people in the audience, they only hear and they only experience you when you're speaking. So it's really important to practice by speaking, and improvising is a great way to do that. When you have that slide up on the screen, you just start talking about it, and through talking about it, you will realize what works, what doesn't work, what are the kind of things that you naturally just say. What's your natural rhythm? How does it work? How fluidly can you speak about this and transition to the next slide? It's so much better than sitting and writing. Writing and speaking are 2 very different things, so just be aware of that. I want to tell you a story about a lady who I worked with called Anna, who didn't use improvisation when she was preparing for her speech. She approached me because she was very, very nervous about a presentation that she had. So she was an executive in a company and she had a big presentation coming up which was going to be presented to the heads of all the departments of her company. So all these people had flown in from all around the world, and there she was, center stage, and she had to just speak to these people in a way that was informative, that was engaging, and she was so nervous about this. And I asked her, well, why are you so nervous? Where's the tension coming from? And she said to me, well, Ehsan, what I normally do is I just write out everything I'm going to say word for word, and I just memorize it. And I said to her, what do you mean you memorize it? And she said, well, word for word, every single thing I'm going to say, I just memorize it, and then I just regurgitate what I've memorized. And I said to her, well, how does that work for you? How has that worked out in the past? And she said, well, sometimes it's okay, but sometimes when I forget one thing, it throws me completely off and I start going off on tangents. But sometimes it does work, but I have to practice for weeks memorizing every single line. And I said to her, well, would it be helpful to you if I told you about a different way of doing this? And she said, sure, how does that work? And I told her exactly what I've told you. Just to take her speech, break it down into key points, break down each key point and link it to an image, and then practice her speech by just talking. So she went away and she did this. And it was amazing. The feedback that she gave to me after she gave her presentation, she basically said, it was so much easier. And the feedback that she got from the people she was presenting to was, you seem so natural. You seem just so confident. Like, how did you do that? That was really great. And she said to me, Ehsan, it was easier than any speech I've ever given. I didn't need to spend weeks memorizing stuff. I just broke it down into steps and I improvised. And I said to her, that's exactly it. So well done for doing that. And she said to me, I didn't think that I could improvise, because I've never done any improv or any of this kind of stuff. But actually, coming to think of it, I'm improvising all the time. I'm actually improvising this conversation with you right now. And I said to her, exactly. And that's what I'm saying to you as well. For those of you who are thinking, oh, improvisation, that's all great. Ehsan, you can improvise. You're an improviser. Everyone is improvising all the time. You were improvising. I guarantee you, today, you had a conversation with someone. Did you script your conversation? Did you write notes before you went out and say, okay, I'm going to meet my friend for coffee. I'm going to talk about bullet point 1, bullet point 2. We are all improvising all the time. So this is just something that's built into us. And when you really use this in your preparation and your creation of your speech, it's such a powerful thing. And people will start to tell you, oh, you seem so natural. I wish I could speak like that. It's amazing to see. So that was the story of Anna. Now, the final point I want to make, and this is a really, really important one, and it's something that I have learned the hard way from not doing. And number 5 is to tell stories. Now, imagine this. I'm sure you've been in this situation before. You're sitting in the audience, someone is giving a speech, and they have a PowerPoint and it's filled with facts and figures and statistics, and they're talking about the literature and they're talking about the data, and it's all very beautifully laid out and written, but you are falling asleep. Yeah, that is such a common thing. And it's something that I did for a very long time until I discovered improvisation. And then I started to incorporate improvisation into my presentations. And I found something really interesting. When I was improvising, the audience were so much more engaged. It was like they were on the edge of their seats because they could feel the difference. When you're improvising, you're present. When you've memorized thousands of lines and you're just regurgitating them, you can basically replace yourself with a video of you speaking. That's not public speaking in my eyes. That's just regurgitating information. People can tell instinctively. We can tell if someone is present on stage. If you're not present, people just switch off. People, they get their phones out, they start playing Candy Crush, they start checking their emails, or maybe they're looking at you, but they're just staring through you. When you start improvising, you become more present, you become more aware of what's happening in the room. You get a sense of how what you're saying is landing, and you can adapt based on what's happening in the room. And I found it's so much more fun. It's just more playful, and you don't need to sit and memorize thousands of lines of words that you've written. You can just pick out the key points and just focus on those. Now, I'm going to tell you a final story, and this is from a client who I'm currently working with. His name is Andy. Now, Andy is a senior engineer in the oil and gas industry, and he works for a company that has huge contracts with big firms around the world. Now, Andy had an idea for how he could save his company a lot of money by making some small changes in the way that they handled their equipment and stored it. So he had this idea, and there was someone who he wanted to speak to about it, but he came to me asking for help and said, Ehsan, how do I present my idea to this person? This person was their senior supervisor, and he was just a little bit unsure, like, how do I do this? And his initial idea was, well, here are all the numbers, Ehsan. Look, I've worked it out. Here's all the data. Here's how much money I can save them. Here's the time scales. Here's the time frame. Here's who I'm going to work with. Here's how it's going to work. And I said to him, look, that sounds great. You know, it's great that you have that information, but how is that relevant to the person you're presenting to? And so I asked him, what is the person that you're presenting to really interested in? What do they care about? And he said to me, well, I guess it's a few things. Have I done this before? Like, has it worked with anyone else? What's the evidence that this actually works? And I said to him, fantastic. So have you ever done this kind of intervention in another company? Have you tried this kind of thing before? And he said, actually, yeah. And he told me some stories about how he'd done a similar thing in the company that he used to work for, and he managed to save them money there. And so I said to him, that is perfect. That is so much more interesting and convincing than just saying, here are some facts and figures, 95% of blah, blah, blah. That puts people to sleep. Whereas if he could say, you know, I have an idea for how we can save money, time, and we don't really need to do much in terms of tweaking the business. Here's a story about how I've implemented this system in another company that I worked with. When he did that in his presentation, it landed so much better than before when he was thinking of just giving facts and information. And his bosses actually took him up on it and said, this is a good idea. Let's discuss this further. And so that's the stage that he's at right now. He gave a short presentation. He told some stories about how this has helped other people. And his supervisor said, great, let's go ahead with this. So that's just one example of how stories are so much more powerful and impactful than just facts and figures. So those are the 5 steps that I wanted to share with you. So just to give you a quick recap. So number 1, you just pick one sentence that your whole presentation is about. And you can spend some time on this. You know, one sentence doesn't sound like much, but when I was doing my TEDx talk, it took me a while to get that sentence down because there were so many other options that I had to really condense it down. Now, once I had that sentence, number 2 was writing a list of key points. What are the most important things that you want to talk about in your presentation? And once you've written that, number 3 is to pick an image that represents each of those key points, that really tells the story. Try and make it as interesting and engaging as possible. No stock images, no copy-pasted stuff. Just keep it really, really engaging and interesting. If you have to show data and figures, use animations, use graphics, make it visually appealing. That will connect on a much deeper level than just bland facts and figures. Step number 4 was to improvise. Now, with improvisation, it seems so much more natural and interesting, and you will actually improve your skills. You will find what works for you in the process of improvising as you're practicing your talk, and your audience will feel so much more engaged, and you'll start to get feedback like, you seem so natural. That was such a natural performance. So one final thing I want to say, we've gone through these 5 points. The most important thing is that you take action. So please don't let this be another video that you watch and you think, oh, that was interesting, and then move on to the next one. This only works if you go out and you test it. So don't take my word for it. Please go out and test what we've talked about. Thank you.